What's up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with metaltrenches.com. As always, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. Give the video a like if you enjoy it. Stick around, there's plenty more to watch after this one. Also follow us on social media, sign up for our mailing list, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Even $1 a month makes a big difference. But it's time to do another tier list. And I'd really been kind of racking my brain on what I wanted to do about Killswitch Engage. Did I just want to do a one-off video review of the new album? But I feel like everybody's already doing that. I've got my written review that covers all those same points on there. But ultimately I came down to, hey, it would be fun to go back, listen to all the albums again, and kind of see what I think about them now. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to work our way from the beginning all the way to the new album. And I'll end on kind of sharing my thoughts on Atonement once we get there. So let's start off with their self-titled album from 2000. It's kind of more of an EP, sort of a demo-y. I really enjoyed this album. I actually have it on my shelf. I've got this original copy with this cover art too, not the reedition that they did later on. And it starts with some pretty solid foundations. You've got tracks that later ended up on Alive or Just Breathing in kind of rougher form. There are some of them that I actually kind of like these earlier versions of them. And it's good. It's a really great starting point for a very important metalcore band. And I think ultimately I'm going to put it at, I don't know, like a B. For me, I think it's a B. I'd consider a C, but it's pretty strong. So yeah, I'm going to start them off on a high note there, and then we'll move on to 2002's Alive or Just Breathing. This was the band's actual breakout album, and I'm not even going to bury the lead on this one. It is S tier. This is my personal favorite album from Killswitch Engage. It is the one I listen to the most. Every song on this thing is just fantastic. I also love just kind of this earlier, still kind of raw production. It's a step up from the self-titled, but it's still kind of got this sort of bleak atmosphere to it. And there's a reason why they ended up like touring with Slayer, if I'm not mistaken. They started off on a really heavy note and very strong. Just classic songs on this album. In fact, the CD shelf is right next to me. Let me grab it, and I just want to look at it and admire it. Where's the case? Yeah, man, they start off with just the intro to Numbered Days. The time approaches. Like, I remember hearing that for the first time, just being like, fuck. Yes. And then, of course, My Last Serenade was my jam for a very long time. Still is, really. Just a great song. I remember watching the music video to that one. To Just Barely Breathing, Temple from Within, Vita Infra. Just an amazing album that is still just as strong for me today, if not more than it was back then. But moving right along here, let's go to 2004's End of the Heartache. And I've kind of moved around a lot over the years on this album, but I am back at, it is definitely S tier. I was re-listening to it again just before I recorded this. And man, this is just another really consistent album. Obviously, this is the first album with Howard after Jesse initially leaving. And I was kind of iffy about Howard at first because I really liked Jesse, but I think he really proved himself on this album. And for my money, this is Howard's best album. A lot of people even argue that this is the best Killswitch Engage album. I like it a little bit less than Alive or Just Breathing, but they are very close. And of the two, this is probably the catchier album. This is where they really kind of stepped up the melodic side of everything that they were doing. I feel like a lot more kind of Gothenburg-y guitar harmonies and stuff popping up on this one, as opposed to just sort of brute strength. And very consistent, but some really standout tracks like A Bid Farewell, Rose of Sharon, the title track. And even beyond that, though, the deeper cuts are also fantastic. So great album that definitely deserves to be remembered. But that is, to me, like kind of where the band hit their peak, because As Daylight Dies, which came out in 2006, was not, in my opinion, a good album. I'm going to put it about C tier. Um, I feel like this album is vastly overrated. I think they were at sort of peak popularity and there was a lot of hype surrounding this album. And I feel like some of that seeped into the rankings because when people really want something to be good, they'll tend to like justify to themselves that it is good when it's really not. And I gotta say, re-listening to this thing, it's just not that great. It's not bad. It's got some really good standout tracks on it. My Curse, of course, is excellent. It always reminds me of playing a Guitar Hero too, or was it on Rock Band? I can't remember, but it was one of those. But that aside, great album. I mean, great track. And there's other good songs too, like Still Beats Your Name, Break the Silence, Reject Yourself. But for every great track, there's a really kind of mediocre track. It's also just kind of sappy and melodramatic, and that's always been kind of part of the Killswitch thing, is these sort of overly dramatic, kind of sometimes romantically tinged songs. But I feel like this is where they really started stepping over the line and just making it straight up almost unlistenable for me personally. And I know there's going to be people who disagree with me, but ultimately, I think putting that at a C is pretty fair. And I think the initial reviews around this album were tainted by just the amount of hype and, again, the just desire coming off of these very strong two albums for them to keep the consistency, but not the case in my opinion. So then they just had to be confusing and be another one of those bands that they already have a self-titled and then they put out another self-titled like later in their career. That always annoys me when people do that. So this is Killswitch Engage 2009, and this album is just super generic to me. There are some catchy parts. The opening track, Save Me, but it really just... it lacks heart. Like, I was listening to it and trying to put my finger on what it is about it that kind of bothers me. And it's not even necessarily the songwriting. Like, the songwriting's okay. It's not anywhere close to their top tier stuff. But the real problem seems to be the production. And I even, as I was kind of perusing through what other people thought about this album, the best word that came up was actually flaccid. Somebody described the production as flaccid, and I think that is a perfect word to describe it. It kind of takes away any of the punch that any of these tracks really have. I wouldn't doubt that they sound a lot better live, but I'm just judging the album, and I would put this one at either C or D tier. That's a tough call. It's a little worse than As Daylight Dies, so yeah, I would probably put it down at D and leave it at that. And so from there, Jesse returns in Disarm The Descent in 2013, 4-year gap between that self-titled and this album. And it's pretty darn good. I was kind of hard on this album when it first came out, a little rough with it. I did like the singles, but I thought they were a little sort of, at the time, I felt like they were kind of phoned in. I felt like they were a little bit cookie cutter. But again, going back and re-listening to it yesterday, I like this album quite a bit more, and it's grown on me. And I'm like, hey, this is pretty solid. I really like that cover art too. It's that just sort of quintessential cover art. It reminds me of the first two albums actually, with that same kind of, you've got the girl's face with the effects laden all over it and like fire and texturing and stuff like that. But anyways, it's good. It's a good album. B tier, feels fair. Lots of great catchy songs. It kind of feels like an older album too. Like, not only does the album art kind of align with those older albums, but it just sounds like one of their older albums. And so they did a good job. There's obviously great ones like In Due Time. I think it's just Due Time. I always mess up the name of that track. And yeah, there's a bunch of other good songs on that one. But let's keep on going here to 2016's Incarnate. And this is another one that I'm just like, blah. Like, it's bland, it's generic. I actually like it worse than the self-titled. I think the self-titled's better than this one. I don't know what happened between Disarm the Descent and this one, but whereas some people felt like this was an improvement, I felt like this was a step backwards. Like the songwriting just doesn't strike me as impactful or as interesting, as catchy even. It's just a lot of forgettable tracks. And of course, there's going to be other people out there who disagree with me, feel differently about it. But for me, I just was re-listening to it and again finding myself like, man, I I have like zero connection to this. Like I don't know what it is, but it's just not doing it for me. There are a few decent tracks, but one of them I kind of found it funny because there's I forget which song it is now, but there's a riff on it that I was like, oh, I really like that riff, but I know that riff. Like I've heard that riff before, and I was looking in the comments and somebody pointed it out. It's a riff from Hangar 18 from Megadeth. It's like almost the straight up same riff. So I don't know if that's supposed to be kind of like a sort of Quentin Tarantino, like, hey, I'm paying tribute to the greats kind of thing, or if they just like unintentionally ripped it off. But yeah, that aside, I'm not a fan of this album, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to anyone. So I think D tier is good, and that's why I was even considering putting the Selftitled in C, because I like it. I think it's better than Incarnate. But anyways, let's go up to present day now, and we've got 2019's Atonement, which, man, I went into this with low expectations, just considering the last couple of albums were not really doing it for me. And I gotta say, I actually have not bought an album, like a physical copy, since the End of Heartache. That was the last album I bought. That was 15 years ago. And wouldn't you know it, I went out the other day and I bought Atonement. So for the first time in 15 years, I bought a Killswitch Engage album, and I think it's much deserved. I think this is an A tier album. It's one of their best. I would put it in their top 3. It's fantastic. I was completely floored, surprised. It's very consistent. It's rock solid. It's a nice mix of some of their heaviest tracks to date with some of their kind of more melodic and catchiest tracks to date. And you can't go wrong with it. There's so many good things about it. And they do a good job on this one too of stepping right up to the line of that sort of cheesy melodramatic stuff that they do, but they don't quite step over it. Like even I Am Broken Too, which is kind of a cornier track, it feels genuine, it's passionate. I don't feel like it's overly cheesy, and I love the message because me being in mental health, that is a very important thing that I want more people to be spreading the word about in a positive way. But then you've got, I feel like it starts off a little weak with Unleashed, which is a fine track, but it's just kind of one of the more cookie cutter ones. But then the Signal Fire, that track came on and I was like, damn, these guys have really stepped up everything. Like the guitars sound better. There's so many, they brought back all the riffs I love about this band. And I really associate Killswitch Engage with just riffs, lots and lots of very kind of Melodeath inspired classic harmonies, and all that comes back on here to an even stronger degree. And Jesse's vocals, man, like I know he put in a lot of work, like kind of dealing with even some like damage he had done in the past, but he's come back stronger than ever on this album. He does an incredible job, and you hear the range. And then something with the production, too, is just much better on this album, too. I feel like it really captures every musician just perfectly. The Crownless King is also a total banger. Probably one of the best tracks they've ever written, one of the heaviest tracks they've ever written. They've even got, there's a guest spot, and I didn't realize it, but it's actually their first ever guest vocal spot on an album, which is shocking to me considering how long they've been around, and I'm sure plenty of musicians would have loved to have been on their album. But Chuck Billy of Testament, of all people, is on this track, and it really adds a lot to it. This track and like one or two others also just give me this Lamb of God vibe too. Like that's how heavy they are. Like it runs right up to that level of heaviness where it steps beyond metalcore into like groove metal and like post thrash metal, that kind of stuff. And man, I am loving it for that. Us Against the World, I already mentioned I Am Broken Too. Know Your Enemy is also just a real, like, throw your fist in the air kind of track, and Take Control, Ravenous. I know Howard does a guest spot on this album as well. I feel like it could have been a little bit more than it is, but it's a good one. And yeah, just across the start to finish, I love everything about this album. There are still a few kind of too far moments where it gets corny for me, like Bite the Hand That Feeds lyrically gets a little too ham-fisted, and then there's like the stereotypical like spoken word part where it's just like, yeah, everybody rise up, blah blah blah, and I'm just like, okay, that's enough of that. I don't need that. Just sing and scream and let me get into it myself. Don't tell me what to do. but beyond that, amazing stuff, like almost S tier, save for just a few little things that I would tweak about it. And also, like, it obviously doesn't have the legacy of these other two albums in S tier right now. But yeah, I think that pretty well covers it. I ended up, if you want to know my rating and you haven't seen the written review, I gave them a 7 for innovation. I could honestly potentially move that up to an 8, because even though they're not doing anything different for the genre, I feel like they stepped up their game significantly, so they could get an extra point for that. Musicianship, I gave them a 9. It's not like the most intense, crazy technical album, but it's very well written, very well performed. And I gave it a 9 for enjoyability. I could potentially move that up to a 10 too, because I like it more every time I listen to it. I only shied away from the 10 just because, again, there were a few points that detracted a little bit from my enjoyment of the album, but I try to reserve that 10 for like almost perfection, and it's not quite there. But yeah, so all things considered, I'd kind of pull up my overall score, because it was an 8.3, which is like a B minus, and I feel like that's honestly too low. Like, it needs to be at least B plus. Could even, again, if I moved up innovation and enjoyability, that's like a 9, so like an A minus. So still kind of figuring it out, because it's relatively new to me, especially in comparison to these other albums. But ultimately, I'm interested to hear what everybody else thought. Want to hear you down in the comments. And again, if you enjoyed this video, there are plenty of others. There are other ranking videos. There's also the Band That Changed My Life series. There are quick opinions and recommendation roundups, and of course the full-length podcast too, where you can hear interviews and like discussions and things like that. So stick around, sub if you haven't already, like the video if you enjoyed it, drop a comment, follow us on social media, and please consider supporting us on Patreon. I also just started a Subscribe Star, just search for Metal Trenches, but links for all of that stuff are also down in the description. And gotta cut things off here. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.